What's up, everybody? I'm Hoops and Hip Hop, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Pokeblock Podcast. Today's episode is actually going to be the last one before Christmas, which is really crazy. I hope everyone's having a great holiday season. I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year for that matter, but I'll see you guys once more before the New Year, so we got a little bit of time to get there. But with that being said, we really only have about, I think it's about a week and a half-ish until the new year, which is really crazy. Not only are we entering into a new year, we're entering into a new decade, which is crazy. I remember hearing about the year 2020 in school when I was like in junior high, and we talked about it as if it was like the very far future. And now it's like here. It's real life. It's insane. It really is crazy. But with that being said, obviously we talk about Pokemon on this podcast. And so relating it to Pokemon, I wanted today to talk about Pokemon in 2020 and what we kind of have to look forward to, what we can expect, things we know are coming out, things that are kind of speculated to come out, things that could have a chance to come out. And different things along those lines. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at. And as far as things we know are coming in 2020, first, I guess we'll start off with Sword and Shield stuff, because like Sword and Shield is obviously the main pillar of what's going on moving forward, and we do actually have some things in Pokemon Sword and Shield itself that we have to look forward to. Things like more Gigantamax events, because we know there's more Gigantamax Pokemon that are unobtainable, that are yet to be had, and then we have whatever is going on with all the data mine Pokemon, which includes the Gigantamax Pokemon as well. And honestly, like, I have touched on this in other podcast episodes before, but this is something that I'm really looking forward to seeing how they handle, because with the two Gigantamax forms that are still being withheld, which is Gigantamax Toxtricity and Gigantamax Melmetal, they could either just do the thing they did with Gigantamax Snorlax, where they release it in an event, it's available for a month, you can catch it, blah blah blah, and it's basically just kind of like a timed event for the game, and really means nothing more past that. But I also think there's a significant chance that they could have something more going on with them, because if we look at Melmetal's a mythical Pokemon, and like, I know that when it comes to Pokemon events, they have not given mythical Pokemon much love, other than, here's your Pokemon, have fun with it, we're not going to tell you anything about it, but there you go. So we know that kind of thing has been a trend lately, but there's always kind of some kind of hope, I guess, for mythical Pokemon events like this, that something could come with it, you know, just whether it be story or just a little bit more information or a small little event that's like a little bit more extra compared to the regular Pokemon, something along those lines, especially because Melmetal technically hasn't even been introduced into the main series yet. Like, it is a Pokemon, we know it's an official Pokemon, but it's only been in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee at this point. So, Pokemon Sword and Shield is like its first entrance into the main series, and it hasn't even had that chance to do that yet. So, with the event that will eventually introduce it, I think it'll be interesting to see if they do something to properly welcome Melmetal as not only being introduced into the series, but also being a mythical Pokemon. If I was remotely in charge, I would do something, because it just makes sense. But I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. And then as far as Toxtricity, I believe I've talked about this on the podcast before, maybe. I know I've talked about it a bunch in my own videos. It's kind of hard to keep track of everything. It's just like all over the place. I talk about so much Pokemon all the time. Like, this is just, it consumes me. So sometimes I lose track. But overall with Toxtricity, it's proving to be very important to Pokemon Sword and Shield, because not only does it have two forms, which gives it some special attention, it's got a Gigantamax form that's currently being withheld of all Pokemon to withhold the Gigantamax form from, and you've got some imagery of it all throughout the region. You've got the statues in Holbury within the game, you've got the Turffield Giant, which looks a lot like Gigantamax Toxtricity? And if it is, what does that mean? What does that imply? I feel like this needs to be addressed. Like, this isn't just like a wishful thinking type of thing with Melmetal. Like, this needs to happen. You've set it up, so you've got to talk about this. And if they treat it like a regular event and don't say anything, that's going to be a major disappointment. It's going to be a huge missed opportunity, and it's just going to be... It's going to push us even further over the edge into Pokemon event reform. This is a thing that's needed to happen since, like, Generation 6, where we need to get back to actual Pokemon events instead of just giving us the dang thing. But if that happens with Gigantamax Toxtricity, then that'll be like officially the tipping point, and I might have to bust out a pitchfork because I will have just about had it at that point. But yeah, those are the two, I would say, marquee things from Pokemon Sword and Shield that we still have to look forward to. But there are like regular Pokemon that we still have to look forward to as well in terms of them being added to the Pokedex. There's a bunch of legendaries that are coming. There's several starters. And there's about 35 Pokemon overall, which is interesting. And like, when it comes to introducing new Pokemon into the Pokedex, usually in this kind of situation where it's an event, it's a brand new mythical. So to do it with a standard Pokemon is going to be a little bit different of a practice, which is going to be interesting to see. Once again, I kind of doubt that they would do an event with a regular standard Pokemon like that, but it's going to be interesting to see how they're implemented anyway, just because of the decks being obviously segmented and they're being introduced, so that'll be a lot of fun. And then on the subject of new Pokemon getting added into the Pokedex, there was a development actually in this over the past... literally earlier this week. So Nintendo of Europe actually posted a video comparing Galarian form Pokemon to their normal counterparts. And a couple of them that were shown in the video, and this was all like within Pokemon Sword and Shield itself, or Sword and Shield itself. A couple of the the standard forms of these Pokemon that they showed in the video within the game do not currently exist in the game. It's things like Hoennian Zigzagoon, and I believe Cantonian Ponyta was shown. These don't exist within Pokemon Sword and Shield right now. You cannot obtain them, yet they were in this video that Nintendo of Europe posted. So this is basically confirmation that we're going to get most likely all of the regular forms of the Galarian form Pokemon, which is, once again, really cool. Just adds more Pokemon to the game, kind of, technically. It's still the same Pokemon, but, you know, different type, different form, so it's something. And this begs the question of how it's going to be implemented. People have said that this could very well come from a Pokemon Home update, or not update, but the release of Pokemon Home, which we are definitely going to get into in a second. But I think regardless of the way it goes, it's just cool to kind of see that there are kind of more Pokemon trickling in, because that's obviously what that's what people wanted. That's what people were afraid of when this whole National Dex thing happened. They wanted all the Pokemon, bar none. No matter what it took, they wanted all the Pokemon. And even though we're not really getting a sign that they're adding new Pokemon, because like there's still like 400 Pokemon to go, the fact that we've got a handful of 35 that are in the data of the games, and then we've got evidence that they're adding something of some kind, even if it is just another form of the same Pokemon, I believe it's kind of like a step in the right direction for that issue. I don't know how far it's going to go. I don't know how much they'll do on that, but I can say that it's a step in the right direction. And as far as Pokemon Home goes, that's going to be the next big thing to discuss here, because we know that Pokemon Home is coming out in 2020. It's supposed to be early 2020, and I believe a lot of this adding Pokemon stuff kind of fringes on what Pokemon Home becomes, because we know that Pokemon Home is essentially this generation's version of Pokemon Bank, where you can use it to transfer Pokemon up to the newer games, and you can basically, I believe you can transfer back and forth a little bit, but it's essentially just to get your Pokemon from other games up to the current games. And the thing is with Pokemon Home is, first off, it's a smartphone app, so it's not going to be like on your Switch necessarily. It's going to be on your phone, and you'll be able to like basically take your Pokemon wherever you go, and then you'll be able to transfer for them to your game from anywhere, I believe, which is really cool. I think that's awesome. But overall, when it comes to Pokemon Home, it's got a lot of there are still a lot of questions to be had, because even though we know the gist of what it is, Game Freak have also said there's going to be more to it than just transferring Pokemon. There's going to be some gameplay elements to it, and I think people have speculated maybe this could be a battle system, maybe this could be like a Pokemon and Me sort of thing, where you get to interact with your Pokemon. People aren't really sure what this could mean, but Game Freak has said that there's gonna be more to it, which has kind of sounded like it's supposed to be supplemental in a way to not all the Pokemon being in the Pokedex, because I guess the idea is that if it's not available in Sword and Shield, you still have it in Pokemon Home, and you can do things with it in Pokemon Home. But if that's going to be like a valid like alternative, what you do in Pokemon Home has got to be like huge. It's got to be like almost adventure sized, and I highly doubt that Pokemon Home is going to have that. So like for the most part, aside from little extra things here and there, it's just going to be a Pokemon transfer system. However, with that being said, the mere presence of Pokemon Home, I think, allows for things to take place. I was talking with one of my patrons about this not too long ago, and we were having a discussion about what things Pokemon, I guess, what things could happen over this generation. And I suggested that with the release of Pokemon Home, this is obviously going, even though it's an app, this is going to be a big thing for Pokemon, especially next year. It's going to be a big thing that happens within the generation, just like Pokemon Bank was. And I can't remember if it's paid or not. I want to say no, but regardless, it's a big thing. So Pokemon are going to want to promote it regardless of whether it's a paid service or not. And so because we already know that it can connect to Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, for instance, and you can transfer Pokemon from Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, I think a fantastic way to promote this would be, to promote Pokemon Home, I should say, would be to, in a situation like that, when Pokemon Home releases, add all of the Kanto Pokemon into Sword and Shield as an update, so you can transfer all of your Pokemon from Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee to Sword and Shield, and not just the select ones, and that way you kind of do something to celebrate and promote Pokemon Home, while at the same time adding support to Pokemon Sword and Shield, and then you add value to Pokemon Home at the same time by increasing the number of Pokemon that you can transfer. I think that would be a great way to do it, and if you were going to add any Pokemon whatsoever, because like the idea that they're going to update and bring in the rest of the Pokemon into Sword and Shield over time is very, very unlikely. Like, the idea that they would add very much of anything past what we already know about is unlikely, and especially adding the whole Pokedex. Like, it's just not going to happen. We might see another handful past what we know, but overall, it's just, we're not going to get that many more. So it is somewhat I wouldn't say unreasonable to expect, but it is unlikely. And but if you were going to do it, like if this was going to happen, Kanto Pokemon would be the way of always to do it. Not only just from a it makes sense standpoint, because it's Kanto, it's Gen 1, but also from Game Freak's perspective, because they love using Gen 1 Pokemon in any way they can promotionally, and this would be the perfect way. And it honestly wouldn't be, it wouldn't really be that big of a deal to do either, because once again, they're Kanto Pokemon, so they're familiar, they're marketable, like, they would be easy. Number 2, you're not adding in the entire dex because there's already a bunch of Kanto Pokemon within the game itself. I'm not sure how many there are specifically. You probably would still have to add close to 100 Pokemon because there's probably only like anywhere from 30 to 50 Kanto Pokemon in the game right now, if I had to guess. But the thing is, you've already kind of got their models from Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. I know there was the whole glow up about, or the blow up. I don't know all these slang terms. I'm just trying to fit in. There was the whole blow up with people accusing Game Freak of like not using or using the same models when they said they had not used the same models. So it's like, we really don't know what to believe, but regardless, they could most likely very easily crop just pull the models of the Pokemon that aren't in Sword and Shield from Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee and plop them right in, and it would be fine. They might have to do a little bit of graphical tweaking because Let's Go's on a different engine, but overall, I think that is something that is very, very doable to just kind of implant those Pokemon into Sword and Shield in that way. And I think, like I said, I think it would be great for the promotion of Pokemon Home itself. It would appease people, even if it is Kanto, it's still 100 more Pokemon. Overall, I think it would be great, but it's really, like, it's wishful thinking at the same time, and it's going to be very, we're basically just going to have to wait and see what happens overall to know the true effect that Pokemon Home is really going to have on the status of the Pokedex, because I think it will have some effect. I think we will get some Pokemon, but how many we get is yet to be seen. And speaking of phone apps, we're also supposed to get another one in 2020, and that would be Pokemon Sleep. Problem is, I have no idea what I could possibly speculate about Pokemon Sleep, because it's such a strange concept. The idea is that from the way they marketed it, they basically compared it to Pokemon Go, but in your sleep. So you're basically going to be playing and catching Pokemon and doing everything based on your sleeping habits. And I mean, it's cool that they're attempting to like encourage people to sleep and obviously like get out and be active with Pokemon Go. So overall, they're encouraging this healthy lifestyle, but how do you implement gameplay into someone sleeping? Like, how can people input, like, actions and, like, gameplay instructions when they're sleeping? It as of right now, it kind of seems like more of a record, like, a daily record type of situation more than anything, where you say, oh, I slept 6 hours today, but if you sleep 8 hours, you can catch Dragonite or some rare Pokemon, and so that encourages you to sleep 8 hours. That's kind of what it seems like it would have to be, but it's hard to know at the same time. Like I said, it's just such a weird, unusual, strange concept that I would love to say more about it, but I really can't, because it's something that's so out of left field that it's one of those things we just got to wait and see. So with Sword and Shield post-launch content covered, we got Pokemon Home covered, we got Pokemon Sleep covered, all things we can look forward to. Now we're going to talk about the idea of an actual like main series game, an actual Pokemon like legit title. I obviously talked about the idea of a third Pokemon game a few episodes ago, talked about how that could be amazing. I think I mentioned the possibility of like other titles that could come as well. Once again, it's hard to know what I've mentioned where with all the discussing of Pokemon that I do, but overall, when it comes to new games in this generation, Pokemon have a bunch of different options. More so than I believe they've had in at least a while, if not ever. Because we could legitimately see, like, all of these games could very well legitimately be released within this generation. We've got an updated version of Pokemon Sword and Shield, whether that be a third version, whether that be sequels, what have you. We've obviously got the Diamond and Pearl remakes, and we've got another Let's Go game, hypothetically Let's Go Johto. All three of these games, I would say, all have a decent likelihood, at least, of being released within this generation. The problem is there's not enough time within this generation to release all of those games, because Pokemon generations historically are always 3 years long. And that goes back to even Generation 1. You had Generation 1, 96, Generation 2, 99, you had Generation 3 in 2002, and then Generation 4, I think, was like 3.5 years because they released in 2006, but it wasn't a full 4 years. And then you went to another 3.5-ish years, I believe, for 2010, and then 2013 for X and Y, 2016 for Sun and Moon, and now 2019 for Sword and Shield. So this has been a thing that's been going on, and they even stated that's kind of like a model they have in promotional like interviews for Sword and Shield. They said their work for, or their framework, I should say, their development time for main series Pokemon games is 3 years. So we've got a 3-year window to work with in terms of games we could see in this generation. Those are basically the 3 options right there. You don't even have enough time to do all of those in this generation. And on top of that, that doesn't even include spin-off games. Spin-off games are, even though they're spin-offs, are still kind of an important part of Pokemon as a whole. And we have not received an actual, I would say, it's really hard to keep track of spin-off games because there are kind of so many of them, but like in terms of either a 3DS game or a Switch game, other than Pokemon Shuffle, which was a very small release because it was free to play, we have not received an actual legitimate third-party release for spin-off release for Pokemon, I believe, since Pokémon Tournament in 2016. So we are going basically 3 years on. I mean, we're crossing from 2 years into 3 years. It's been over 2 years at this point since we have actually received a spin-off title for Pokemon. Give me just 1 second. I'm basically dying, and I gotta grab a tissue because my nose is like freaking out. I think like the more I do these podcasts, the more my body starts to deteriorate, because I've noticed I had a cold like a month ago, and I noticed when I record these episodes, me talking for a half hour straight just like apparently turns my immune system off, because by the time I get to the end of the podcast, my throat is all dry and my voice is cracked, and now my nose is running. It's kind of a terrible, awful thing. I hate being sick, but here we are. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Thank you for bearing with me. So we have not had a spin-off title in over 2 years. So I also feel like it's kind of prime time for us to receive another one. But once again, where are you going to fit it in? That's the tough thing. It's really, really hard to release. Like, we seldom ever get 2 Pokemon games released in a year, meaning like a main series game and a spin-off game. That hardly ever happens. And when it does, it's usually in the form of a console game and a handheld game. Yeah, that's correct. I believe the last time this happened was in, I can't remember when the original Pokémon Tournament came out, but I believe it might have came out in like 2014 or something like that on the Wii U, and then we also got Oraz in 2014 on the 3DS. So that kind of situation. But the problem with the Switch is that this is the console for both now, so you can't really separate them in that way, and if you can't separate them in that way, then you're kind of log jamming your release schedules. So I feel like all of the options that Game Freak have themselves individually kind of jeopardizes the potential of spin-off games in the future, just because there are other games to be had that I think would be more, they would just be like, they're higher up on the totem pole, basically. They would be a little better to do. They would be higher sellers, so they would be more advantageous on Game Freak's part. and they would just be like better games overall. Like I guess this is kind of up for debate, but I think that probably the most or the least likely game to happen on this list of 3 that I mentioned, with the Sword and Shield improved game, Diamond and Pearl remakes, and Let's Go Johto, I think the least likely one of those to happen is Let's Go Johto. But is anyone in their right mind, once again, I guess I can't say right mind because there are some people who have other opinions, would you choose, are there going to be enough people out there, I should say, that would want a Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game over Let's Go Johto, or something along those lines? I know there are those hardcore Mystery Dungeon fans out there that would say yes, but for the most part, Mystery Dungeon is not going to sell 10 million copies like Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee did. So Let's Go Johto, in that sense, is way more advantageous to make, especially because they've already kind of established Let's Go on the Switch, and so they have the engine for it. It would be way easier to develop a follow-up game as opposed to a brand new Mystery Dungeon game that they have not had for the Switch, so they would kind of have to build it from scratch as opposed to building it off of another game. And so if I had to guess, I would say that the spin-off scene for Pokemon Sword and Shield is going to be really interesting, and I think it's somewhat in jeopardy, although, as I'm talking about this, there is one thing I need to mention in this sphere, and that would be the Detective Pikachu game, because there's a Detective Pikachu game that is coming to the Switch. I believe it is next year, and I believe it's also a sequel to Detective Pikachu, so it's Detective Pikachu 2, which is awesome. Detective Pikachu is great, but even though that is a spin-off game and it's coming to the Switch next year, when there's also probably going to be a main series game of some kind as well, I also kind of feel like that is an exception to the rule because it's Detective Pikachu. This is basically like a sub-franchise now within Pokemon itself, because it's so popular and because it literally had a feature-length live-action movie made of it, and that movie was so popular. So they're kind of obligated to kind of keep that moving forward, and so it's not really the same situation. Like, that's kind of like, I feel like that's the sort of thing that has to happen for there to be a spin-off game within the next couple years. It's got to be based on something as popular and as massive as Detective Pikachu to justify doing it alongside your main series titles. So going to be very interesting to see what happens with the spin-off titles over the next couple years with everything we've got going on. But even with that being said, even if we kind of see a decrease in the number of spin-off titles over the next couple of years, I don't think that's any reason to worry, because basically they're just taking a backseat to all of the main series titles, because we got so many of those in the pipeline potentially that could come out, and all of those are going to be amazing. Like, there's so many improvements they can make to Sword and Shield, as we've already discussed. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes or Diamond and Pearl remakes, and Let's Go Johto, are you kidding me? 3D remakes, HD remakes of Pokemon Gold and Silver. Yeah, please give me those every day of the week. So overall, 2020 and the future in general for Pokemon is looking extremely bright, but 2020 is going to be very interesting because, like, technically you could describe it as an off year since we just had Sword and Shield, the new main series games, come out this year, but there's still so much coming out in 2020 that it's ridiculous, and there's most likely going to be another main series game as well that will get announced some point next year, so we have a ton to look forward to in 2020. But with that being said, I've ran out of time, and as you can clearly tell by the way this ended, I am getting sick and very, very, very hobbled, so before I transfer this via the internet to you, I'm going to go ahead and end off. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I really appreciate you listening wherever you're listening. If you're listening somewhere where you can comment or like or whatever, please do that. It really supports the show. If you want to hear more from me, you can subscribe to me on my channel, Hoops and Hip Hop. And yeah, with that being said, we'll be back on Friday next week. So after Christmas. So since I won't see you until then, I hope you guys have a very Merry Christmas. Hope you enjoy your time with your friends, your family, and I just hope you enjoy the holidays and take it easy and take that time off that you need to enjoy yourself. But yeah, with that being said, I'll be back on Friday. So until then, I love you guys very much. I'm forgetting my own intro, or my outro, and I will smell you guys later. Have a good one.